Welcome to this latest session, which is entitled Practical Approaches to Training Others to Perform Polypectomy. So first of all, we have, I'll wait for it to come up. I don't want to press it too much. There we go, the session objectives. Understand basic training theory and how it applies to polypectomy. Use the GPAT, the Global Polypectomy Assessment Tool, to assess the quality of any polypectomy, but I would add to use that assessment to inform the training experience. Review cases submitted by endoscopy fellows with a deconstructed performance enhancing approach, and Azanda from the local team here will be doing that later. So the question, which element is not part of the Global Polypectomy Assessment Tool? Tip control, injection technique, snare positioning, and photo documentation. So if you could vote as soon as you have made your mind up about that. Now, before I invite myself to start, I will just really make the point that we realized probably for a very long time that polypectomy training is not as good as it could be. And here at GIEQs, we're trying to address that. We think that polypectomy training is different from training insertion or detection and requires a slightly different approach. And really what we're going to do this afternoon is try and unpick some of that. So I will go straight into my first presentation, which is ground rules for polypectomy training, applying theory. Now, I wouldn't say that we've got this last column sorted yet, but we're very close to it. And, you know, this last column is not the difficult bit. The bit to the left is the difficult bit, and we've got that sorted out. So what I would like to see is dedicated polypectomy lists for our trainees. And it's clear that the polyps on the training list are appropriate for them. So if we're looking at someone starting out at polypectomy, we should be looking at SMSA 1 and 2. But if we're looking at someone who's just about to go independent, then we should be looking at SMSA 2 and 3. Now, you might say someone who's recently independent shouldn't be doing SMSA 3, but we think it's appropriate to be doing SMSA 3 with supervision, because what we believe is that the trainee who's doing that sort of polypectomy under supervision then goes independent. They have the confidence to deal with the polypectomy 2 as well as the competence, because often it's a question of confidence when the person is practicing independently. Right. So the next step really, and I think this is absolutely critical, is ensure the trainee has all the necessary background knowledge, particularly on the safety aspects of polypectomy. And I would argue they shouldn't be allowed to touch a snare or whatever if they do not have all that background knowledge. Now, last year we ran 3 seminars in polypectomy and characterization, decision-making, and resection techniques. And I'm saying to my trainees, I want you to watch those webinars so you know exactly what we're talking about here. I don't want to be discussing, you know, different types of PIP patterns and Paris classifications and explaining risk and everything. I want you to come into the training knowing all that. And it's very interesting. David was telling me yesterday that it was absolutely remarkable that when Vikash came here, because he'd spent COVID watching GIEQs apparently, and so he came here and he just like knew everything there was to know, and he just needed to be shown how to do stuff at the end of the day. And David said that was a gift to him and really accelerated. He put his hand up like this. He said the training curve for Vikash was almost vertical because he came in with all that knowledge, really. So I think it does work and it does make a difference. Now, what about on the day? Well, hopefully John might be talking about this, but we think it really important that in any training episodes, and I used to be trained by in the RAF to fly airplanes. And the first thing we did before we got in the airplane is I didn't know what was happening at the time, but essentially we were aligning agendas. The training guy would say, well, what are you expecting to get out of this? Well, this is what I think we should do. And here's some ground rules. And if you have a bad landing, I'm going to take control of the aircraft and everything else. Okay. So, and it's exactly the same, but the stakes are very high. Obviously they're high for flying, but they're very high for polypectomy as well. And I think what we're just trying to grapple with here is some of the language we use. Because if you think about it, there's something about the proximity of the polyp, especially the larger polyps, to the tip of the scope. You're advancing the scope, you're advancing the cannula. When you pull back, you're pulling back in the scope or pulling back the cannula. You're closing and advancing at the same time. There's quite a lot of stuff going on there that you've got to get right. And you and the trainee and the nurse, all three of you, need to be on the same page with that language. What about during the procedure? Well, we were talking in the safety just now about cognitive overload being a risk factor for adverse events. And particularly in the early stages of polypectomy, I think everything possible should be removed from the trainee's attention.
So has this helped us? It floats, but has it helped us?
I think it does. I mean, I know that polyps can float, but it doesn't float like a usual polyp. I can't really explain it. Why?
So the other thing to think about, I think, when we're looking at something that we think is a polyp, is one of the critical steps is, where does the polyp join the normal mucosa? So where's the border with the normal mucosa? And if you look at the base here, is it in continuum, or is there a clear margin of one joining another?
It's in full continuum.
So we have a lesion here which has completely normal mucosa above it. And in isolation, if it was a bit yellow, you might say, well, that's a lipoma. Are you going to get 3 lipomas together in the same segment? It's very unusual. It's possible, but not. Okay, let's put them out of their misery. What do you think this is?
So this is a pneumatosis coli, very probably. Very uncommon. Haven't seen it before. It's the first time.
So we think this is pneumatosis, Roland, and he's got 3 or 4 of these effectively air-filled pockets. We can do one or two things. We can take a biopsy forceps or a needle, and we can push it, and you'll get a depression sign, a bit like a pillar sign when you get a lipoma. The difference is if you nick the mucosa, it will simply deflate because it's full of air. But we don't think there is a polyp to remove here.
So, John, the last pneumatosis I saw was 20 years ago, and I'd seen maybe 3 or 4 before that. And they were characterized both endoscopically and radiologically by multiple small submucosal air pockets, not 2 or 3 big lesions like this. I've not seen this or read about 2 or 3 big lesions caused by pneumatosis.
I agree, but give me a different diagnosis. We can resect this. I said to Peter Jan, we'll do the patient no harm in resecting this. We can lift it and remove this, but I think it will just simply deflate.
Well, I definitely don't think you should resect it because it's completely normal. And
it could be 3 lipomas, I guess.
I'd be more in favor of a lipoma myself, and the reason it's not looking yellow is the mucosa is probably a little bit thicker here than it would be in the right colon where we normally see these. But I definitely wouldn't resect that.
Okay.
But shall we ask the panel? Sander, what do you think?
Could it be a lymphatic ectasia?
I think it's too big for that, to be honest.
Becca?
My first thought was lipoma, but actually it's so interesting to see what it does in water. And if it is a lipoma, and therefore in the the submucosal layer, actually it seems to be discrete, the way that it's lifting up and not spreading. So I'm not no help because I don't know.
So Vikash, can you just explore, are you familiar with the term formative assessment? Yes. So just run through for the people watching who may not know that term, what I mean, if you don't feel comfortable, say so, and how this tool can be used as a formative assessment tool.
Yeah, so it's a dynamic tool and can be used at not just at the end of your training, but as you're progressing through your training. And I think breaking up the tool in terms of components also helps you identify weaknesses or areas that you need to work on as you're progressing. So if you're great at snare placement, but you're still not sure about recognizing lesions or choosing the choice of therapy, then it shows you, it directs you exactly where you need to spend more time and work on. So that's a major advantage of the tool as well.
So
can you be clearer?
Yeah, can you be clear? So this is, and I actually ended up with an over-injected lesion, which was even harder to resect.
Yeah.
So this was to drive home that point. You see that it's actually quite injected. Then John commented, well, yeah, it's in the cecum. It will diffuse quite rapidly, just to maybe save my honors a bit.
Yes. So he was on your side. So I think there's a really important point here that So for me, listening to that, Becca, this is, what we do is really deconstructing, from a training point of view. And I think we should probably finish on this point, if okay, because it's a really important point. What do you think is going on there, and what do you advise in the future? So this is a sort of what's in my head question type of thing, because it might be a bit tough to get into my head.
Communication breakdown.
So yeah, just unpick the communication breakdown. So Xander said, maybe I should have told David that it wasn't clear. All right.
Yeah.
Now David's a pretty forceful character. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. And Xander's a nice guy. Is he gonna say boo to David? Probably not. So what's the issue there from the trainer perspective?
It's difficult for the trainee to provide feedback for the trainer if the trainer's not open to that. I think your trainer has to be in a position that they're willing to hear that. But actually, I think what Vikesh was saying before about these videos and then watching them back together, I think it's very, sometimes memory is not quite the same as reality.